Hi, I'm Michelle Shepard, registered dietitian at West Coast Nutrition. And today I wanted to pop in because I've been seeing some really common weight loss myths, particularly for women, cropping up, or my clients are being told these things. And so I wanted to break some of them down. I'll be breaking a bunch of them down over on Instagram over the next couple of weeks, but this one is a biggie. So I wanted to go into a bit more detail with you guys here. The myth that we are talking about is if you are struggling to lose weight, you just need to eat less and move more. And I can almost guarantee if you've talked to your doctor or your family or friends, one hopefully meaning to be helpful person has said some variation of this to you. And it can feel really frustrating because if you're like my clients, you're already working really hard and you are trying to eat well and you're trying to move. And sometimes life gets in the way, but it might seem harder than it should. And your sense of that is probably very true. One of the challenges women come across with this adage is that the idea is just eat less food, right? There's very little specific guidance there on what do you eat in that very little food you now have. And then also, even though you're eating all this less food and you're exhausted and tired, you should sometimes somehow find more space to exercise more, exercise harder, exercise longer. And so I want to start with a caveat that calories do matter. So this is not some internet, hole where we're going to be like, they don't matter. You just need to do less carbs or less fat. Calories do matter. So having enough to suit your body is important. But if you just crank back the amount of food and calories without looking at the foundation of your diet or what might be missing or what you might need more of, you're going to make your job harder. And so that's what I do with clients, build that foundation first, and then we can figure out what that calorie piece might look like. So if you've been struggling, here's why I want you to think about eating enough and what to think about most before you try and reduce your food even further. The number one thing that I think with my female clients particularly is iron. So women's iron needs are twice that of men. While we are generally smaller, we are also less muscle mass, pound for pound, which means that our calorie needs are lower. And so getting enough iron when you're losing some every month, for those of you who are still having a period, or even if you're not, needs are still higher because there are still some losses. And like trying to, make that back with food alone is really hard. So most of my clients are low in iron intake to start with. The challenge here is that for weight loss, iron is very closely regulated with your energy levels. So if we don't have enough iron, we don't make enough hemoglobin, and that's the cell that moves oxygen around. So like cellular respiration, literal, can your cells function? So when iron intake is low and we're in iron deficiency, even mild, or the low end of even the normal spectrum, we can see that energy goes down, our non-exercise activity thermogenesis, so just like the movements you do and the urge to get up and down or fidget and walk, all of that goes down as your body kind of stores and conserves what energy it does have. So you're actually likely going to burn less calories and you're going to be less motivated to move. And on the other side, enough iron is really important for your thyroid. And your thyroid produces hormones that regulate your metabolic rate or your natural calorie burn. So if you are iron deficient, you're going to be slowing that thyroid down, lowering your metabolic rate, making it even harder to eat less and also lose weight, much less maintain the same one. And on top of this, remember, you still feel exhausted because you don't have enough energy and oxygen to fuel all of your cells. So by just eating less food or trying to, eat smaller portions, often we cut out some of our most iron-rich foods. Those guys are primarily animals. So these are our meat, our dark meat chicken, so like your chicken thighs, your turkey legs, chicken wings, things like that. A little bit in fish as well. And in our plant foods, we're looking more at the darker beans and legumes, so black beans, red lentils, kidney beans, stuff like that, as well as there is some in our leafy greens, so dark leafy greens like spinach, arugula, kale, bok choy, the really hearty guys. If you're plant-based, you're going to need to get almost 1.5 to 2 times more iron because it's harder to absorb from plants. And so you might be struggling extra, which is okay. We can fix that. But keep that in mind that if you've been really struggling with energy and weight loss, iron might be a big piece of that. And just eating less food is not going to make that any easier. In fact, it's going to make it a little harder. The second and third nutrients go together. So we're going to talk about them as a pair. And so eating less food, because you're trying to lose weight and eat less and move more, will also likely decrease your calcium intake. And along with that, your vitamin D intake. So vitamin D we normally get from the sun and from a few things like salmon and like fatty fish, but is also found in some of our fortified foods like milk and things like that. So calcium is primarily found in dairy foods, so yogurt, cow's milk, kefir, cheese, all of that good stuff. But it is also found in dark leafy greens. It's found in some seeds. There are some plant-based places to get that as well. And with a lot of us having a little more knowledge about gut health, and if you're like me and lactose intolerant, you're eating less dairy because you don't feel good, our calcium intake can go down really, really quickly. But calcium is really key for fat loss, as well as other things like, bone health and cancer prevention. Calcium actually makes our fat cells more metabolically active, so more able to burn the fat stored in there for energy by kind of activating an enzyme that helps to take that fat and burn it for fuel, right? So that's fat oxidation. That's how we lose weight, is oxidize or use that fuel that we've stored in our, fat stores and burn it for energy. And so when we're low on calcium, your fat cells slow down and have a harder time using all of that stored energy. So if you're eating less food because it's eat less and move more, you're definitely getting less calcium. And calcium is already low in a lot of my clients to start with, despite being so important. The other part is that vitamin D works with calcium to help that fat oxidation process. And when vitamin D is low, calcium is often low because their absorption and their usage is closely tied in our body, particularly with regards to bone health and particularly with regards to fat loss. So making sure you're getting enough of both long-term is really important to just making fat loss easier. So I don't say any of these things to scare you or go, you have to go get a supplement right now. But I do really want to drive home that you shouldn't move to eating less food if you've been struggling with weight loss right away until you've covered your basics of, are you getting enough key nutrients? So start off by looking at your iron intake, your calcium intake, and make sure you're getting a good vitamin D supplement. And then maybe dive in. And if you want to do something like tracking a few days, just to look at the micronutrients, my favorite app for that is Chronometer. I'll drop a link in this email so you can have a look, or in the YouTube description if that's where you're joining us. But just instead of focusing on how many calories you're having, focus on how close you're getting to meeting those base nutrient needs. And you'll build a much better foundation to go from with a healthy thyroid and healthy fat oxidation, so you'll have more energy to move and it'll all feel easier. I hope that was helpful. I'll be chiming in next week with another women's weight loss myth and how to fix it. So stay tuned.